Hi, I'm Helen Besant and welcome to the webinar for the first specialist unit for the Learning and Development Pathway for the Advanced Diploma in Strategic Learning and Development. So the unit for this webinar focuses on is 7LDO1, which is Organisational Design and Development. So what we aim to do, and what I'd like to do for the webinar is, first of all, provide an overview of the unit. Then we'll have a review of the assessment, looking at how the unit is assessed. And then finally, I'll just look at some additional guidelines for you to look at the requirements of an assessment at this level of study. And when we look at the assignment, it's going to be the most recently released assignment brief. So the assessment brief is, as you can see, the ID number on the screen, but is the one that the assessment brief that was released in June 2024. So if we have a look then at the unit and just have an overview of the unit, it focuses then on the key principles of organisational design and development. To find out more about the content of the unit, I'd suggest you have a look at the unit specification, and that's a CIPD produced document, which I'm sure your tutors will make available to you. The unit consists of 4 learning outcomes and it has 16 assessment criteria. So each of the learning outcomes has 4 assessment criteria. The assessment then for this unit, you will need to provide answers to 4 separate questions of approximately 1,000 words each. So the assignment will have a total word count of 4,000 words, plus or minus 10%. So each of your answers to the question should be 1,000 words, plus or minus the 10%. And each of the questions is going to assess your knowledge and your understanding across all of the 4 learning outcomes. So it's assessing your knowledge and understanding across the unit. When you come to attempt the assessment questions, it's important that you demonstrate for each answer which question you're answering, which learning outcome and which assessment criteria your answer relates to, by using some headings and subheadings, so it's clear which question you're answering. Remember also, when you're answering the questions, to bear in mind the context of the questions and the audience that you're writing your answers for. So this particular assessment then is you're answering the questions as part of a project to review organisation design and development in your organisation. And the audience is the board, so you're looking at some senior people within the organisation, so you need to be pitching it at a strategic level. So it's important that you bear that in mind when you're answering the questions. It's also essential that when you're attempting the assessment questions that you're relating your responses to your own organisation or one with which you're familiar. Whenever you're asked to do that, make sure, please, that you are relating the answers to the questions to an organisation. And this is so that you're able to demonstrate your application of your knowledge and really demonstrate your understanding. So we kind of, particularly for this one, is you're taking the theory of organisation design and development and being able to apply that into a more strategic organisational setting and context. So if we look at the first question then, this focuses on the internal factors that can impact organisational design, and it's on development, obviously. So it's looking at the question, in addition to the external drivers for change, it is important that we consider the organisational specific factors that are likely to impact our organisational design and development. So we recognise that there's external and internal factors that can affect organisational design and development. This question is focusing on the internal factors. So it's asking you to evaluate 3 of the key contextual variables, such as, and it gives you some examples. You've got the organisation's structure, the organisation's culture, the organisation's the sector it operates in. You might look at the nature of its business. You might look at just what you're looking at is the context, and you need to look at 3 different variables that are actually determining the context of your organisation. And then that evaluation is outlining from that evaluation how those variables can impact the organisation's design and development. So that's really considering, first of all, what the internal variables are that can impact ODD, and then looking and explaining how they're going to impact the organisation's design and development. And you'll need to use your wide reading to achieve that. So second question then, this is about being ready for change and being ready for organisational change. So it starts with, I've read about, so this is coming from, if you look at the context of the actual question, you get a message from your organisation's head of people management. So this is coming from the head of people management. I've read about the importance of a change-ready culture when changing an organisation's design. If the organisation to adopt a different organisational design, discuss the key factors that would need to be considered when planning to implement this. So this is thinking about the organisation, again, your organisation. Should it change its organisational design, you need to be able to discuss the key factors that you would need to consider when planning to implement that new design. And again, you would be using your wider reading to identify those and then relating that to your organisation and explaining in that discussion why those factors would need to be considered. So you'd be thinking about things like, what you need to prioritise, what would be most important within the organisation, thinking about the human reactions, maybe thinking about just the impact on stakeholders, and I think from your read and identify what factors need to be considered when planning to implement, and you're going to implement a new organisation's design. This is looking at organisational frameworks. And looking at organisational development frameworks in particular. So what the question is asking you to do is evaluate 2 organisational development frameworks, recommending which one would be appropriate for the organisation. Justify your recommendation. So the first thing is you're going to identify 2 organisational development frameworks. So you could choose from many options. You've got Galbraith Star model, or you've got the 7S framework, maybe Burton-Litwin's model, 6-box model. So there's various kind of key well-known models for organisational development. And the question is asking you to evaluate 2 of those. So you're looking at an evaluation, so it's what would work well, what wouldn't work so well for your organisation. So it's again applying it to your organisation, thinking about the context of your organisation, and your recommendations would be why these particular models would be, or why one of those models would be appropriate for the organisation. So you're evaluating 2 and they're recommending which should be most appropriate to the organisation. Remembering then that in your justification of your recommendations, you can support it with reference to your wider reading, but also think about the strategic business focus of your recommendations. So you're considering the reasons why it would be appropriate to that organisation. So again, it's being able to apply it to a particular organisational setting, and that would further justify your recommendations. And the fourth question then is very straightforward. It's looking at encouraging employees to buy into any changes that you make to organisation design or development. So the question starts: the success of any changes made to the organisation design or development will be reliant on the buy-in from its employees. Examine 2 distinct strategies to encourage the engagement of employees to any future changes made to the development, made to the organisational design or development. So again, use your wider reading because that's essential, and you're looking for strategies that is going to encourage the engagement of employees to any future changes that you're going to make to organisation design or development. So use the literature, but also you are making recommendations, and you're looking at justifying. So when you're examining those distinct strategies that can be used, support your examination with some context justification as well. So why would they be appropriate to your organisation? So you're using literature, but also you're thinking about the organisation itself and why those particular strategies will encourage the engagement of employees to any future changes. So when you are answering any assessment questions, I would really recommend that you keep in mind what the main marking criteria are. So those are on the screen, the 6 points, and it's important that you think about these, so that these are what the criteria used when marking your assessment questions. So you need to make sure your answers are focused, you show a depth and breadth of understanding. We need to think at level 7, being able to apply strategic thinking, and this is a professional business qualification. So any all the answers or any recommendations that we make should be at a strategic level and provide professional advice to an organisation. It's essential that you demonstrate that you've conducted academic research and that you're using your wider reading then to inform your answers. You must ensure that your answers are persuasive and original. So you're developing original arguments from your wider reading, and thinking about the presentation and language used as well. Is that consistent with a professional qualification? So they are the marking criteria. We'll go into them. I think it's probably a good idea to actually look at, well, what does that look like? You know, when I come to answer my assessment questions, what does that look like? So if we have a look at the grid then that comes with assessments, and this is the generic grade descriptor grid, and it comes with all the assessment briefs, and it kind of gives you an indication of what's required to achieve different grades. So you pass, your merit and your distinction. So on the left-hand column, you've got the generic grade descriptors, which are the marking criteria. And then in the subsequent columns, you've got a brief overview of what's required against each of those to achieve certain grades. But if we have a look at just what that looks like then when you come to do your assessments, and I've just got some final guidance which should help you to actually demonstrate a number of these points. So when you come to answer the questions, it is important that you plan your answers. Think about what are the main points that you need to include? What are the main arguments? What is the main academic literature you can use to support your answers? And if you can plan each one, well, then you've got a far better chance of providing a direct response. It is easy to kind of lose track. It is easy to go off on a tangent, but it's really important that when you answer a question, that you're providing an answer to the question that's been asked and not an answer to a slightly different question. So focus is really important. And the importance of planning is to ensure you don't miss anything. A lot of the questions have got kind of multiple parts, so you want to avoid missing anything, and therefore only answering part of the question. So the importance of planning, I really can't stress enough. So at this level, then, you need to demonstrate more than just your knowledge of a subject. You need to show depth of knowledge and understanding, and you need to be evidence in that. So you need to be able to analyse the subject, and this is where applying your knowledge within a business context. So, as I said, when it asks you to apply to your own organisation, that you are able to do that. And it's kind of translating that knowledge and applying that knowledge. So you're demonstrating that you actually do understand what you've read. And you can apply it in a strategic and business-focused approach. So it's the translation of the kind of the theory into a strategic approach. And you really do need to make sure that you are responding according to the command verbs in the questions. If you're asked to evaluate, for example, or you're asked to critically evaluate or analyse something, it's important that you do that. And if you find yourself becoming too descriptive in an answer, stop yourself, because that is not what you should be doing. You need to reduce the level of descriptive text and narrative, and kind of elevate your writing, so it's kind of at a different level, and you're showing more critical thinking. So and then critical thinking isn't about criticising anything, it's about taking a more holistic approach, and things work well in some contexts, for example, and not so well in other contexts. So a strategy that might work well in in a small, medium enterprise might not work in a large global company, for example. So it's just thinking and having that criticality of thought, and responding accordingly to the command verb that is within each of the questions. Now, it's essential for all of your answers that you references a wide range of reading. So that's a given. You must inform your answers with reading of appropriate sources. And appropriate sources are those that have been written by experts in their field. So we have resource lists that are included within each of the units, and that's in the unit specification. But also you have access to so much material. If you go to the CIPD website, you go to the Knowledge Hub, the CIPD commission so much research that is actually relevant to your studies. So please just go and make use of that. Also within the Knowledge Hub, you have access to the online database, EBSCO, and they've got a wealth of academic journals which are available to you free as a CIPD member, but also you might have access to other similar online databases. Google Scholar is an option that also has some credible sources. The people management publication that we receive, that's got really good organisational case studies. So you can search back copies in their archive section. So you can go onto their website and look for really good case studies, which I find useful when really useful to support recommendations, for example. So, I would say that's a really good source for you. What you should avoid then is, please do not use blogs, do not use generic websites. LinkedIn, for example, is not appropriate because they're not written by credible authors or anybody that's particularly experts in their field. So make sure that when you are doing your reading, that you are actually accessing and using what are credible and reliable sources, and also sources that are current. Try and, whenever possible, use more current sources, because that's going to be more relevant and applicable to today's world of work. Think also about the presentation of your work. You must make sure that you are considering how professional your answers are presented. So think about the structure of your answers. Think about potentially using headings and subheadings to clearly set out the different paragraphs or highlight the main points that you're making. Because there's no requirement to write an essay, but to write clear, business focused, but supported answers, so with references to each of the questions. Also, though, you do need to stay within the word limits for each assignment question and each assessment as a whole. So make sure that you're actually staying within the word limit, because if you were to go over that, well, then your work would not be able to be marked, or under. If you were significantly under the word limit, your work couldn't be marked. So you must be within the lower and upper word limits for an assessment. I would suggest that you revisit the CRPD word count policy, just so you're happy and confident with what is included in the word count and what isn't. So it's important really that you're familiar with that. I mean, your centres, I'm sure, will go through that with you, but do please bear that in mind when you're writing your assessment answers. And as we come to the end then of the webinar, I'd like to thank you for joining, and I really do hope you enjoy the unit and you get a lot out of it, and that you found this webinar useful in giving you that some guidance into, you know, the expectations of the assessment, particularly at this level of study. And if you have found it useful, just to let you know that there are other webinars available. So there's webinars for the core and the other specialist units for your qualification. So hopefully you'll have a chance to listen to those as well. So thank you all, and I wish you well.